Let me put it this way. I'd like to think that God is real.
I don't believe in God because the idea that an omniscient, loving being would judge me, who is mortal and ignorant, based on a few years' experience, I find to be rather a cruel thought.
All the power that God has, he, she, it has given to me. So we're definitely one.
I hope there's something else out there. It'd be fun to experience either that or we're all just evolved apes.
I
was raised atheist. I don't believe in a higher power, but I also don't claim to know everything about the world.
I don't know. I don't know if there is one. I just pretend, I guess, and hope that there's something else out there.
Well, hey, like I said, we're so excited to have you with us in this 5-week journey that's called Explore God. And whether you're here for the first time or you're here for the 10th time, man, we're just excited that you came out to be with us today. Some of you came to worship. Some of you came because you're skeptics and you just want to hear what we have to say. I'm great with all of that. I'm just genuinely excited that you're here with us. And so hopefully my goal is this. I'm going to set this up from the beginning. I don't have this expectation that if you walk in to the house today, that as an atheist, that I'm going to have you walking out of the door as a blood-bought believer in Jesus. And what I just said makes no sense to you anyway. You're like, blood what? That's gross. So I get that if you're not a believer. My goal is for us to open up a dialogue at the very least. What I want to do is I want to show and establish with people that don't believe that we aren't just stepping into this idea of faith as this blind thought. Like, we're not living a life that just says, we believe because the Bible tells us so, or we believe because in our heart. No, I truly believe that those things, while we definitely hold them to be true, there is evidence throughout the universe that points towards a creator. And obviously, like I said before, you're in church, you know where we kind of land with some of these things. We're going to come from a theist perspective, but I want you to know, if you're an agnostic or an atheist, that we love you and we really mean this. We're glad that you're here and that you're going to be heard through this process. I hope that what you hear today shows that I'm not just coming at somebody that doesn't have faith and that vehemently disagrees with the idea that there is a God, as if you don't belong here and that we're just going to trash your viewpoint. I want you to hear the fact that from our hearts to yours, we're going to journey together. And that means that we're going to ask tough questions. That means I'm going to share some things from the perspective of people that don't believe, and I'm going to share things from the perspective of people like us that do. And hopefully in the midst of this, that the truth will be revealed. And I think that's something, no matter what side of the ball that you're lining up on, that you can hope for, that the truth will actually absolutely be revealed. And I would even say this to the people that believe, pray that. Pray that the truth will be revealed. And I think we can do that together. For those of you that don't believe in prayer at all, you can get on board with that. You're all about the truth. So here's what I want to do. I want us to answer the question today that we're going to tackle, is there really a God? Okay, we're going to talk about this question. It's an age-old question. Believers and unbelievers ask this question at some point in time in their life. If you've ever asked the question, I wonder if there really is a God, raise your hand. My hand's in the air. Wow, okay, like one person isn't. You're so awesomely solid in your faith. I'm not going to call you out to make you feel bad for not raising your hand, but you've been warned, okay? No, I'm kidding. A little. Anyway, so what we want to do here is we want to talk about this age-old question, is there a God? And so to do this today, we're going to try something. We use technology, and sometimes this totally grenades on us, but we're going to try this anyway. Everyone get your phone out. It doesn't matter if it's a smartphone or a not-so-smartphone. Get this out because I want you to participate. Now, there's a pen and a Connect card somewhere beside you or something that you can write on if you need to remember your answer for this poll. There's only one answer that you'll choose, but here is the question for everybody in the room, okay? The question is this: what is the biggest roadblock for you to believe that God is real? What is the biggest roadblock for you to believe that God is real? And you're going to get the chance to answer this question, okay? And here are 7 answers that I'm giving. Just choose the answer out of these 7 that best fits you. All right, now what you're going to do, we're going to make this number nice and big for you here in a minute. If you can read that well, whenever you decide what your answer is, you just simply text the number to that telephone number, and it's going to tally the votes for us so that we can actually show you in the room what people think about the biggest roadblock for them towards belief in God is. So the first one is, it doesn't make logical sense. That's just answer 1. So you would text the numeral 1 to that number. 2, I'm not a fan, or rather, I'm not from a religious family. Number 3, inconsistency with world religions. There's too many conflicting ideas about God. Number 4, I see God as someone that's angry or mean, and that's a roadblock for me to believe. Number 5, I had a bad church experience in my past. That could be a lot of people. Number 6, I feel like, that I saw a bad representation of a Christian in my past. Like, it could have been a pastor, or it could have been a person claiming to follow Jesus that was such a horrible reflection of what Christianity was that it's a huge roadblock. And you feel like you cannot believe, or you struggled to believe as a result of that. Or number 7, I just don't think there's any solid evidence for the existence of God, and that's the biggest roadblock for me to believe. So everyone in the room, if you've got a phone, you can answer that. Just choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, and text that to this number. It's going to be right there, 503-743-0051. So while you're texting that number to that phone number there, I'm going to share with you the top 10 reasons why an atheist doesn't believe in God. This is from an atheist, an author. Her name is Greta Christina. She wrote this book with a pretty catchy title. It's called Why Are You Atheists So Angry? Right? This is her top 10 reasons for why she says she does not believe in God. The first one is the constant, or rather consistent, replacement of supernatural explanations of the world with natural ones. Like, we used to think that thunder was from the God of thunder, right? But now we understand what thunder is, people think, we didn't know what a rainbow was, but now we know it's mist and it's a prism that forms within the mist. And all these things are being taken away from the attribute they were giving to God or a God. The Romans did this, the Greeks, they all attributed certain things in nature to God or to a God. And now that we know more about science and nature, then there's less of a need for that. So we're replacing those ideas with the scientific explanation of what they are. So that's her first reason why she says she doesn't believe in God. The second one for her is the inconsistency of world religions. She says, if God is really God, then why can't he reveal himself in such a way to where everybody can see exactly who he is? Because you're saying he's this over here. You're saying there's a bunch of gods over here. You're saying that you're God, weirdo, but you say it, there's a bunch of different inconsistencies there, and people are claiming these things. So I don't believe because of that. Number 3, the weakness of religious arguments, explanations, and apologetics. What she means specifically by this is Christians that just say, I believe because I feel in my heart that it's true. She says that that's too weak of an argument. Or she says Christians that say they believe because they believe the Bible, well, that's too weak of an argument for her as well. So again, I'm not trying to make Christians angry. I'm trying to share a legitimate perspective of an atheist with you. Because 9 times out of 10, if I were to ask you if you've sat down and dialogued these things with an atheist, most people in the room are going to say no. Because they don't want to, because they don't want to get in an argument, some because they feel intimidated. It's not like I want to line up against Richard Dawkins tomorrow or anything like that either. That he's a brilliant mind, But at the same time, I feel like we need to have an understanding of where this perspective is coming from. All right? So let's continue. Number 4, she says, the increasing diminishment of God. Now, that kind of falls in lockstep with the idea that things we attributed to gods in the past, we don't now. She's also talking about the slide in belief. She's saying there's a significant percentage that Barna Research and others have put out that the generations that we see, mainly in the millennial generation, are significantly less believing of God or in the idea of God or a God than they had been in the past. So she's saying that's going down. There's a reason. If God was really God, that would go up. That's what she says. Even though the Bible that we read says it's not going to do that. Isn't that funny? As we get closer and closer to when Christ returns, that society is sliding the other way. That was a free one. I'm not trying to rebut everything that's said here. I'm just sharing these thoughts. Number 5, the fact that religion runs in families. And I'm not going to try to refute every one of these ideas, but she purports that really people that believe, that have faith, only have it mainly because their parents believed, and they believe what their parents believe. Okay, so anybody in the room that believes, that has faith in Christ, whose parents didn't have faith, just cough one time. I'm going to move on. Number 6, the physical causes of everything we think of as the soul. Now, this atheist believes that there is no soul, that you are soulless. Man, girl is cold. That's okay. All right. So she says that you're soulless, that everything that you can conceive as consciousness all just comes from the brain. That's it. All right? So that's her perspective. It's the gray matter up here. You have no soul. When you die, you're done. You live, maybe you reproduce, you die. Number 7, she says the next reason why she doesn't believe in God is the complete failure of any sort of supernatural phenomenon to stand up to, I love this, rigorous testing. Now, she, as an atheist, does not deny that there are evidences of things that have happened that cannot be explained within the world, that there are evidences of even medical journals that kind of note that things happened and people were healed unexplainably. They document these things from time to time, but because there's no consistency to it, she says, because it can't stand up to rigorous testing. In other words, every time we say, okay, God, make that miracle happen again, go. It doesn't happen because there's no control, no scientific controlled test for this to prove it can happen. She doesn't believe it. Okay, so, and fair enough, right? It doesn't, we don't see any consistency there. Number 8, the slipperiness of religious and spiritual beliefs. Number 8, the slipperiness of religious and spiritual beliefs. So this is where she says, for Christians in particular, she says, if things go the believer's way, they praise God for the fact that God answers prayer. But if things don't go the believer's way, they praise God anyway because that wasn't God's will. That's not fair, she says. That's an unfair argument. Now, some of you are really tempted to be like, so, I don't care. Don't do that. Just understand we're grasping a perspective of someone that does not believe that there is a God, okay? And that's just a fair perspective of hers. She says, you guys, you come up with a way to win either way. So how do we deal with that? And she can't deal with that. And again, you're dealing with someone whose concept of faith and perception does not allow any room for God to take up space in her life or her heart, to even begin to conceptualize the idea that as we grow closer and closer to God, that his will and his desires become our will and desires. Number 9, she says she doesn't believe in God because of the failure of religion to improve or clarify over time. She looks to the scientific method and says that we have this thing called the scientific method that corrects itself, that improves over time. It realizes data showed one thing, but more data comes in and proves that that's not true, that we can move and lay that idea aside because we know that's not true anymore, and we can believe this idea because the data is pointing towards this idea and continue to get better and better and better. And she says that religion does not have the ability to improve or clarify over time. I would argue that one as well. Again, the whole point of what I'm saying is not to just bust these up, but to give you perspective. But I want to talk more about that one at the end of the message today, because I believe that our faith certainly does have a moment of clarity that came in an astounding fashion. All right? So, number 9, that was that. Number 10, she says, the complete lack of solid evidence for God's existence. Boom, mic drop, out, right? That's her 10th reason for saying that she does not believe in God. And this is a direct quote. She says, it's not up to us to prove that God does not exist. It's up to the theists to prove that he does exist. It's, and that's a direct quote. So she's saying that it's on us to prove that he exists and that they don't have to prove that he doesn't. And to me, if you don't think it's fair that we say when God answers prayer, we rejoice, but when God answers prayer with an answer that we don't like, we rejoice. If that's not fair, how is this? If we're getting into a philosophical sparring match, then it cuts both ways, doesn't it? Just in the same way that if you say that I cannot prove that there is a God, you cannot prove that there is not. But this is the perspective. This is 10 big reasons why a person is an atheist. Her name is Greta Christina. So let me do this. So we're going to share the poll results here to show you in the room here what Peak City Church is saying makes up the biggest roadblock for you to believe that God is real. Now, interestingly enough, I have never seen one of these polls come through where no solid evidence wasn't the leading factor. So I'm proud of you guys. I don't know why I'm proud. It's just data, but it's great. I'm glad you shared honestly. So the majority of the room says it just doesn't make logical sense. Well, I'm glad that you're here today. I'm so glad that you're here because I'm going to help you with that to a certain degree, as much as you'll allow me to. So a small percentage said, God's angry, or I'm not a fan of or I'm not from. I don't know why I keep saying I'm not a fan. I'm not from a religious family. Then we see other leaders there being obviously no solid evidence, bad representations of the church or Christianity, and that certainly can lead to somebody saying that's just a big hurdle that you've got to get past. Now, Greta Christina, I have a quote from her that I want to share, and this is what she says. She said, if there's an argument for religion that's convincing, actually convincing by means of something other than authority or tradition or personal intuition or confirmation bias or fear and intimidation or wishful thinking or some combination of the above, wouldn't we all know about it? Wouldn't it have spread like wildfire, she says? Wouldn't it be like the meme of all memes? I mean, we all saw that Simon's Cat video within about 2 weeks of hitting the internet. Don't you think that the truly excellent argument for God's existence would have spread even faster and wider than some silly cartoon cat video? Which I never saw the video, so maybe I'm just like the only guy on the internet that hasn't seen that. I don't know. You cat people will talk to me about it later, I'm sure. But I would say to this, I believe that there has been a message that has spread like wildfire. And if you want to know more about that, I would encourage you can hop online, and for everybody that's watching in the online community, we're so glad that you're with us today from wherever you are in your homes. You can just jump online to peakcity.church/messages and check out our Easter message from last week. It will speak directly to that quote. All right, so let's talk about this. Today, we just want to have a discussion about faith, this idea that there is a God. All right, so as we discuss this today, whether or not there is a God, I want you to know one key principle. We all have faith. Did you know that? Maybe you don't accept that. Well, we all have faith in something to a certain degree. Faith is not exclusive to whether you are an atheist or a theist, meaning someone that doesn't believe there's a God and someone that does. Everyone, absolutely everyone, has faith in some form. Some of you believe that the sun is going to rise in the east and is going to set in the west. Like you have faith that that's going to happen. You have faith that when you flush your toilet, it's going to flush. Man, sometimes we need faith to believe. Anyway, I'm going to leave that one right there. You believe that when you get in your car and you crank the engine that it's going to start. Some of you, it grows your faith because you drive a clunker and you're like, God, please let this car start. Some of you, you put faith in different things. How about this? When I set this stool down right here, and I sat down on this stool, I don't think any of you went, I don't know about, I don't think he's going to make it. I don't think that thing's going to hold up. And if you did think that, thanks. I realize that you think I'm fat. I appreciate that. And I am a little, and I'm happy. I'm a happy guy. But I don't think any of you said, I don't know, man, that stool, it's not going to hang on. Like when you came and sat down in your seats this morning at Peak City Church, none of you grabbed the chair and said, I'm going to check this for structural integrity just to make sure that it can hold my body when I sit down, fearing that you're going to pull a shallow Hal and spill out on the other side of the aisle. You didn't do that, right? You didn't do that because you had faith enough to believe that when you sat down, the chair was going to support your weight. And this would have been a terrible illustration if I sat down on this stool and it broke all of a sudden. Anyway, but we all have faith to a certain degree. So the question is not, do I have faith? The question is, where do I put my faith? Where do I put my faith? See, whether you believe that the universe was created out of chaos and out of pure luck and just coincidence, or you believe that it was created by an intelligent designer, you have faith to believe that that happened. And no matter what you see in terms of your walk of faith, whether you see it as trivial or big or important to your life, we all have it. Again, one group says you cannot prove that God exists. You have another group that says you cannot prove that he does not exist. We all have faith in something, right? So now that we've established at least that philosophically, I want to talk to you about 4 reasons, to me, believing in God makes sense. And that's all we're going to do today. I'm going to share these 4 reasons that I believe that believing in God actually makes sense. So if you don't believe, we're coming from a perspective, you're hearing from someone that does. And I'm going to try to share this in a way that helps you kind of have a little bit more understanding and perspective for why I and other people that believe that there is a God actually believe that, okay? So the first thing is this. Believing God exists makes sense when I consider creation. Believing God exists makes sense to me when I consider creation. Now, think about it. Everything that we see in this world was made by someone, right? The car you drive was engineered by many someones, was created by somebody. The chair that you're sitting in that we now know does not collapse under your weight was made by somebody. The food that you ate last night was prepared by somebody, and it was probably made by that chicken that laid some eggs, and, it was created by something or someone. And that is what we see throughout all of creation. This idea that says, even like your phone, this was created by somebody, but the idea that there is no creator to bring about all of creation is really like me saying, if we just sit here and wait long enough, that phone is going to appear just like that. Over millions and billions of years, all of a sudden I've got a Google Pixel 2 XL. Yay, Right, boo iPhone. I just said it. Anyway. No. Anyway. Everything was created by something, by someone. And it takes more faith to believe that that's random than to believe that somebody else created it. It truly, truly does. And there's lots and lots of unanswered questions out there that we have. And I want to give just a little bit more perspective to that for you now. So why don't you check out the side screens?
There's a whole bunch of natural phenomenon that religious people used to just attribute to God. Thunder is the sky god getting angry or whatever. And now we have scientific explanations for this. We know exactly how thunder works. We know how lightning works. We know how clouds form. We know, to choose a biblical example, why there's a rainbow. It's because of the prism effect, right, of moisture in the atmosphere. And so it can feel like there's no need for God anymore because we've got scientific explanations for all this. However, there's a whole bunch of questions science has opened up that actually didn't exist in pre-modern times or pre-scientific times that are even harder to answer than why is there thunder or why is there a rainbow? And that's a question like, for example, why does the universe have a beginning? Because for a long time, in the kind of early modern era, people just assumed it was steady state. The universe had always been there. So there was no need for a creator because you didn't have a beginning. And then you get the prediction of the Big Bang, that there actually was a beginning, and then you get experimental confirmation of the Big Bang through the background radiation and so forth. And you realize now we have to explain why there's something rather than nothing. And that is not there is no scientific answer to that. There's a scientific answer to why is the sky blue or why is there thunder, but you can't form a scientific question about why there's something rather than nothing. Science can't get there. Another one is consciousness. Human beings are aware of ourselves, and other creatures even seem to have a little bit of this, awareness. And we're in the world asking questions of the meaning of the world, and we do things like mathematics, right? We start doing math, and we find out that the math that somebody cooked up on a blackboard or in a notebook somewhere connects to the way the universe actually works. Why in the world does math work? Why do we have the kinds of brains that can come up with math that actually describes the universe? That is not a scientific question, but it's a question that we only have now because we see how well math works for explaining the world. So in that sense, I think there are some questions that have been answered and that we don't need religion to sort of answer at a physical level. But then there are other questions raised by science that now there's no way to answer them as scientists. We have to have a philosophical or a theological answer to them. And so in a way, it's just the questions that have changed, and in many ways it's gotten harder not to believe that there's some kind of rationality, some kind of purpose, some kind of consciousness cosmically that corresponds to what we see around us in human beings and in the world that we've been given.
All right, so we're going to say, just for sake of illustration, that this is the sun, and this is the earth. All right, so these two guys right here are about 92.96 million miles apart, right? And we see that the earth orbits around the sun. If the earth were any closer to the sun, we'd burn up. If it was any further away from the sun, we would freeze. It does not allow for life. The math on this is extremely precise. If this is off at all, we don't exist, all right? The earth is rotating right now on its axis at about 1,000 miles per hour. So if anyone ever calls you slow, sitting down, you're still going 1,000 miles an hour. Congratulations. That was free. You can tell somebody, I learned that at church today. Wow, Google it. So 1,000 miles an hour. We're rotating around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. Listen, any slower in this rotation or in this orbit around the sun, and guess what happens? We burn up or we freeze. It doesn't allow for the sustaining life that we see on the planet. It is that precise. This idea that the concepts of mathematics and linear concepts that we find connected throughout the universe originated with us is adorable to me. That's so cute. Oh my goodness, it is just as precious. The fact that we think that somehow we have discovered this system that coalesces with every single pattern that we see in the universe. We have these cosmological constants, and scientists don't even understand why we have them, but we have them. And they're consistently working. There's a mark on creation. Even here, we'll talk about that in just a few moments, that we can see clearly that there is a consistent theme throughout it. You know, the math is so precise in our creation. If anything was to be off just slightly, it would not allow for us to have life on this planet, okay? Now, check this out. Scientists who calculate the odds of life happening as an isolated convergence of the elements come up with mind-boggling numbers. In other words, the scientists that believe that this all just kind of happened because some stuff collided at just the right time, and then bang, all of a sudden we have the expansion of the universe. Here's the odds on that. I wouldn't take this to Vegas if I were you, okay? So this is what they say. The odds are literally 1 in the number of atoms that exist in the entire universe, okay? I actually looked up the number of what they estimate that to be, all right? The number is 1 in 100,000 quadrillion vigintillion. That's a word. I learned how to say it last night. It is a 1 with 63 zeros after it. Those are the odds. How much more faith does it take to believe that than this idea that there could be a creator that actually made it? Something to think about. With all the logical constants that we see throughout the world, all of a sudden now science is having to deal with things that 60 years ago they didn't have to deal with. They believed that the universe always existed. Up until about 60 years ago, the idea of a Big Bang, that wasn't widely accepted by science. They believed this thing called, it was just a consistent state, that the universe always was, right? A solid state that always was being. And all of a sudden now they see evidence that's pointing to the fact that there was a beginning to all of this. And science doesn't know what to do with that. And I'm not standing here going, ha ha, science, meh, God, you know. What I'm saying is that there are unanswered questions that science cannot grasp. I mean, even the most basic questions, like people mock people of faith and say, well, if God's really God, could he make a rock so big that even he couldn't lift it? And to those people, I look and I say, well, if matter is made up of space, what holds matter together? We can all do that, right? I can play the science game too, because you know I like the science, right? The idea that there is these consistent themes and patterns throughout the universe points back to being a single architect that actually made all of this. It takes far more faith to believe that it was random. The psalmist, David, he talks about this, and he says this. Can we pull this up? Psalm 19, 1 through 4. The Bible says it like this way. It says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun. Now, this idea that believing in God makes sense when you consider creation is one that just is resounding when I think about this, all right? So now, I want to lean in just a little bit more. Some of you want to believe, but you think Christianity requires that you think that the earth is 6,000 years old and Adam and Eve rode dinosaurs to church. So you don't have to believe that. Now, if you believe in a young earth theory of creation, I'm okay with that. And a lot of young earth theorists, people that believe in God, that believe God created the world, that think the earth is only 6,000 to 8,000 years old, they say it because they say, well, do you believe that man was fully formed when God created him? And you would say yes. And they say, well, I believe that God could make the earth fully formed in a short amount of time. Guess what? I'm fine with that. You know what I'm also okay with? I'm okay with people that think that the earth was made by God over millions of years. I'm okay with that. You know why? Because it's not for me about the amount of time that it took to see creation take place. When you read the Genesis account, in Genesis chapter 1, it's written in poetic form. And so it talks about, on the different days that God created. And in that Hebraic poetic form, day 1 corresponds with day 4. Day 2 corresponds with day 5. Day 3 corresponds with day 6. And I see somebody that went to seminary back there kind of nodding me, saying, yeah, that's right. So, but this is written in poetic form. So for me, whether it was a day or whether it was like eons going by and that was representative of periods of time where God created, I'm fine with it because this is to me what's most important. It's not about who, it's not about how rather, it's about who, because I believe who is greater than how. Who is greater than how. Because we don't claim to understand how God did it in the first place. Even if you knew the time frame that it took for him to do it, you have no idea how the Creator did it, do you? But there's just marks that say that we are a product of creation. Think about that for a second. Who is greater than how? Science does not negate God. I want to say that to you. I'm a firm believer that science does not negate God. Just like we saw in this video clip, this idea that atheists purport that say the more we discover through the scientific method that we realize we didn't know before, the less need there is for God is simply not true. Because the more we discover, guess what it does? It points more directly to the existence of a creator that made all of this. Because there is a pattern to the universe that we live in. So that's one of the reasons why I believe that it makes sense to believe in God. Here's the next reason. Believing God exists makes sense to me when I consider human life. When I think about human life itself, it makes sense to me to believe that there is a creator. This is how the Bible says this. The psalmist also says this in Psalm 139. He said, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them even came to be." This is how the psalmist says this. And when I think about the human body, when I think about our circulatory system, I think about our skeletal system, the fact that we can handle this thing called gravity and how intricately we are made, our immune system and the body's ability to heal itself. All these things amaze me. But our consciousness, our emotions, our feelings, love and empathy and all of these things, where did that come from? If not from a creator. We look throughout creation, and I'm telling you, it makes much more sense that there is a creator that put all of those things there. There is a common theme in creation, and people talk about how, evolution is a principle that just shows us that we evolved over time from other stuff. I tend to believe that like things come from like things. If you're an atheist, you don't like what I just said. I get it. I'm fine with that. But you purport this idea of DNA proving that we evolved from other species like monkeys, chimpanzees, apes, whatever. But what you don't tell people is that all mammals have such a closely knit DNA that we're all within about 90% of our genetic makeup. They don't tell you that, do they? They don't want to go there. They don't want to say that a mouse has 92% of the same genetic DNA makeup that a human does. Science. Or that a dog or a dolphin sits somewhere around 95 or 96%. So when you hear about a chimpanzee that has opposable thumbs doing that stuff is within 98% of a human, well, yeah, duh, it makes sense. But doesn't it make more sense to say that there is a thumbprint on all of creation? The reason there's such strong similarities with all mammals is because there's one designer that made it all. And his work is imprinted on all of creation. There's no wonder why these things are so similar. It's because the same God that crafted the world that we exist and live in made you and me. The Bible talks about how he made us in his own image. You know, we see a similar thing. This idea that the mathematical concepts we see throughout the universe, even the fact that we see some mathematical concepts that we thought were born in Europe and we thought were born in the Middle East, because those ideations both came originally from those areas, yet they led to the same formulaic discoveries of mathematics. But they just popped up there. Oh, it was my idea. No, it was my idea. No, it wasn't either one of your ideas. Because the logical constants that we see that have been designed within this world were created by the same designer. It's his pattern. If you're tracking with me, say, mm-hmm. If you really don't like what I'm saying, don't worry. We're going to land the plane in a few minutes, I promise. Remember, free Chick-fil-A, right? Just hold on to Monday. Monday's coming. It's going to be so good. It's Christian chicken. You probably didn't like that either, but it's delicious. It's extra blessed just for you. I'm having way too much fun up here with this. I want to show you a quote by a cosmologist, an award-winning cosmologist. His name is Alan Sandage. He won the 1991, it's either Crayford Prize or Crawford Prize in astronomy. He says, I find it quite improbable that such order came out of chaos. That there has to be some organizing principle. God to me is a mystery, but is the explanation for the miracle of existence. Why there is something instead of nothing. To anyone here that just vehemently refutes the existence of God, please show me one instance in the whole of all creation where life or an animate object came from an inanimate object. Please do that. Please show me. Show me one instance where death produces life, where something that is dormant, a rock, all of a sudden makes a living, breathing being. It has never once happened. And yet we believe in theory that there were some somethings before there was something that somehow collided, that formed something that was alive. To me, that is absolutely, I applaud the faith of people that believe that, because it is monumental. I mean, that is mountain-moving faith. And for those of you that don't believe, that reference I just made doesn't make any sense to you, but it's in the gospel. This idea is one that takes such great faith to believe that it just poof came out of nowhere. I had something I wanted to read to you. This was actually something that was said by a recently deceased scientist named Stephen Hawking. Theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, he says this. He's an advocate of determinism, all right? And he said, I've noticed that even people who claim that everything is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it look before they cross the road. He said, well, oh, wow. I mean, that's Stephen Hawking's words there. Believing God exists makes more sense when I consider human life, when I consider life itself. Also, believing God exists makes more sense when I consider the alternative. Think about the alternative. Think about the other side of believing that God exists. This, to me, makes far more sense to believe that God exists when you consider the alternative. There are leading advocates in the atheist movement, like Sam Harris, that staunchly simply believe that we are chemistry and biology controlled by physics. we are controlled by the law of physics, that we are chemistry and biology, that is who we are. That there is no soul, that we don't possess a soul, but we are just made up of gray matter, that we are wired to live, to reproduce, to die, and that those that we reproduce would reproduce and die, and reproduce and, that so on and so forth. This is a viewpoint that's held by leading atheists. So now, I would say this, though, to those that hold that viewpoint, that there is no God, and if the idea of God is an illusion, then this is what I would say as well to people that believe that there is no God, that there's other illusions that you also have to take into account if there's no God. I would say that there's this illusion called the mind. Like this idea that we have a mind that somehow is unique to us, that we can live and breathe and know and be aware of our existence for some unique purpose or any kind of idea like that. I think that's null and void, because if you are chemistry and biology and controlled by physics, then you are just a body. You're a sack of water, and so are your kids, and so is your spouse. I mean, that's just what you are. The whole idea of the mind is an illusion. The illusion of free will, that's another one. You think that your will is free. No, if you believe in the predestined order of the universe, that you are governed and ruled by the laws of physics, all you do is all that the laws of physics allow you to do, and that's it. You live, you die, boom, done, right? That's an illusion, this idea of free will. I mean, Sam Harris on his podcast, he laughed about the fact that he gets angry with his critics. He says, nobody's responsible for his decisions or for the outcome of his decisions. Try living that way. Go ahead. Try taking that mentality and living that way in the world around us, because that doesn't work. But if you don't believe that there is a God that exists, the alternative is not that pretty, because the idea of a mind is an illusion, the idea of free will is an illusion, the illusion of value, things that you feel value towards, or that the idea that you can be valued by someone or something, that is an illusion. So if you're in a world that's governed by the laws of physics, there is no inherent or actual value. There's only ascribed value. It's almost like the worth of the dollar bills in my pocket. They're only worth the paper that they're printed on or the confidence that someone has in that dollar, right? It's just an ascribed value. It's not real. So they say. But in the world of chemistry and physics, when it comes to justice, you can get every single atheist out there on board with this one. I'm telling you, because just is just what we want it to be, right? When it comes to this idea of justice, it's funny. I mean, we're okay with truth being whatever we want truth to be. Like, that's my truth. Your truth can be different, but this is my truth. But when it comes to justice, we want an agreed upon standard to appeal to. We want everybody to adhere, all of us to adhere to that standard, don't we? Believer and non-believer. I think we can all jump on that bandwagon together with this idea of justice. But you can't complain. I'm telling you, if you believe that there's no God, then and you're just a matter of composition of chemistry and biology controlled by physics, then you yourself, you ascribe, when it comes to justice, that you can't complain when value gets unascribed to you. Because the moment that you do, you reach out to a world that doesn't exist to make your case. Think about it. Try living that way. But some of you are sitting here kind of saying, wait, hold on. I don't believe in God, but I object to those things that you're saying. I don't believe all that. Well, I'm going to tell you this, then you're not really an atheist, or at least you're not a good one. How about that? I mean, I know, I'm not going for the sucker punch, but these are principles that are believed upon by people that don't believe in God. No value, no justice, no mind, no you. Like, all these things are just matter, composition, chemistry, subjecting itself to the laws of physics in the world around us. But for the believer, we see this from a different perspective. The Bible says this in Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." This is what we have. This is what God has given us, because we know that we do have an eternal soul that exists, that we didn't just get all this by accident. It wasn't just cosmic chaos that caused all of this to be, but rather there is a creator that designed us that longs to have fellowship with his creation. Believing God makes sense to me when I consider the alternative. But believing God exists makes sense to me when I consider that God can be known. and experienced. This makes sense to me when I can know my Creator. I mean, remember the quote earlier that I shared with you from Greta Christina? It said, if there's an argument that is convincing, why wouldn't it spread like fire, like wildfire? It did. It does. The event was called the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And look, for every non-believer in the room, if you want to go after Christianity, if you want Christians to walk away from their faith in Christ, disprove the resurrection, and it's over. You got me. You disprove that Jesus died and rose again 3 days later, and I'll walk away from this thing. Because that is the hinge point on all of the Christian faith. It is that Christ proved that everything he said about himself was true when he died and laid his life down as a payment, as a sacrifice, as a sin offering for all of the sin, wrongdoing, recklessness of this world. And then he rose again to life from the dead, defeating death itself, defeating hell, defeating the grave. You see, that's where it lands for me. And you say, well, how can you believe in such a crazy thing? I don't think a God that can't perform a miracle is worth believing in at all, to be honest with you. I believe that the God that created all of this has power beyond anything that I could ever know and understand. And if he is an eternal, all-existing, uncreated being, then he certainly holds the power of death and life. And because he longs and loves his creation, he longs for his creation, he made a way for us. See, the unique thing about Jesus is the way that he loved. And listen, if you're here today and you are a skeptic, you're an agnostic or an atheist, and you've had to deal with Christians trying to tell you that you don't know what love really is, I'm sorry. I just want to apologize on behalf of people that have said that to you. It is absolutely ridiculous for someone to look into the face of another person and say, because you don't believe that there is a God, you cannot understand the concept of love. It's just not true. I'm sorry that's been pitched your way. But I will say this, I have never in my lifetime seen love lived out the way that it was lived out through Jesus Christ. It is absolutely extraordinary. It was unwavering. It is something like that we have never seen before or after. So powerfully unique and determined in his love, Christ knew what was coming for him, and he suffered all that he suffered out of love. You think about this. God himself, this may appeal to someone that doesn't believe. This idea that God the Creator puts on skin, becomes a man like this. Remember the quote, there was a Russian cosmonaut that was launched into space, first man into space, and the first thing he said was, I've been to outer space and I've seen neither God nor heaven. It's not there. It's not real. C.S. Lewis responded to that comment. And he said, to go into outer space and to claim that you were supposed to find God and heaven there is about as ridiculous as Macbeth finding William Shakespeare in the upper levels of his home. Because the only way that could ever happen is if the author inserted himself into the story. Jesus has done this. The architect of all of creation saw the brokenness of his creation. A perfect God that's without sin, that can have no fellowship with sinful beings that act and live in disobedience. Because we were so lost in and of ourselves, because we could not and we're not able to save ourselves, the author inserted himself into the story. Jesus became a man, lived a perfect life, took that life and laid it down freely because of love for you and love for me. There's two groups of people I want to talk to here, and we're landing the plane right here. If you are here today and you don't believe, remember this. You can belong before you believe at Peak City Church. You absolutely can belong here before you believe. I'm so glad that you came, and my hope is that you'll continue to journey with us through the next 5 weeks. We're going to journey with you. We'll talk with you. We'll wrestle through questions with you. You know, I know you may not want us to pray for you, but we'll talk. We'll dialogue. We'll learn from each other. And I'll come from an attitude and a perspective that's not trying to prove you wrong, but that's simply trying to share the truth that I believe in my heart. Hopefully we'll be good with that. And then there's another group I want to speak to. If you believe that God exists, maybe some of you guys were just kind of hearing that point in the message where I was doing the, basketball, baseball thing. You're like, man, that's good. I like that right there. Keep it up. Throwing that red meat at me. We burn up. There's a God. I love it if you appreciate that. I did too. But if you believe that and you live your life like you don't, you are statistically proven to cause people that don't believe in God to not believe in God. God's calling you to a higher standard. Don't leave it that way, and don't live that way. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray for those of you in the room that are cool with that. Great. For those of you that aren't, humor me. We're going to talk to God. That's all that prayer is. And I want to pray specifically over those two groups of people that I talked about. For the first group, I'm just praying that the truth would be revealed. For the second group, I'm praying that we would live our life in such a way that it would point people to Jesus and not repel them from him. Amen?